Welcome again to another episode of Workforce Ready with NStar. I'm your host, Nnamdi Ihenacho, the founder and CEO here at NStar Technology. I also teach our database administration program. I've been a database engineer for the last 13 years, and I also have been in tech for 2 decades. So I know a thing or two about the things that I am talking about. And I'm excited to be exploring another important conversation with us today. And today's topic is one that is interesting. And again, I did this disclaimer last week, and I want to also do it. Eventually, I'm going to start evolving. I'm expanding the conversations to be along the lines of tech and not just centered around database administration, right? I speak a lot on database administration because, like I mentioned, that is where I am coming from. That is where majority of my most recent experience is in terms of tech. And so that is why you'd hear me talk or speak on database administration quite a bit. But I am very versed in the world of tech, IT in different ways. And so today I'll be talking about the DBA role versus other tech roles. Let me position this properly. The role of a database administrator versus other roles in information technology. So welcome again. Today we'll just be really comparing the role of a database administrator or the DBA with other common tech careers. And this is for the person who is trying to explore, is this for me or what's the best fit, right? Yes, I'm all an advocate for jumping on and getting on a career in database administration because of the value, but also, just that it has this personal place in my heart. I've done a lot of the work. I know the value of the work we do and the importance of it. But I also am aware it might not be for everybody. I feel like everybody putting their heart to can get into this path, but at the same time, it might not be something that's your cup of tea. But you want to get into tech. What are options outside of this, that you might want to explore? So we'll start with a quick look at, again, the role of a database administrator, some of our, day-to-day, what that involves. Again, DBA, database administrator. You see pseudo versions of this role, right? You see people bear the title, as well. One, it starts with the database administrator role is platform specific. So yes, you can be a database administrator, but you are always going to be a platform specific database administrator. So you are a Microsoft SQL DBA, you are an Oracle DBA, you are my SQL DBA, you're a Postgres DBA. So you're not just a database administrator, you are platform specific, right? That is one. Now let's talk about what exactly the role of a database administrator entails, right? This is I have a colleague who will say the database administrator role, DBA, stands for default blame acceptor, right? Because we get blamed when things break. We are the easiest targets because we have to prove that it's not our fault some of the time. It doesn't say it's the database until proven otherwise. So someone says we're the default blame acceptor, but one of my bosses, one of my managers, when I first started in this career path, he gave the easiest way to break it down, the easiest non-technical way to break down the role of a database administrator, and he called us the gatekeepers for the data. So I'm expanding that to be business critical data, right? Yes, data, but really what's the bread and butter of data for us is the business critical data, the ones because business is data. Data is a business. Every business is driven by data. And if you don't have a plan in place to manage and protect and, grant access, secure your data, you're going to be out of business in no time. So data is directly, or data directly affects the business and business outcomes. And so it is important, the role of a DBA cannot be overemphasized. When we talk about the role of a database administrator, it's very important work that we do. People always wonder what's the difference in what we do and why the pay is the way it is. Because when people compare it to, like, well, a lot of people make it look like what we do is, a lot of DBAs make the job look simple. The job itself is not depending on the situation you're in and the place where you work, and I'm trying to find the right words and not oversimplify certain things. It is a lot of work. It requires a lot of intelligence to effectively perform the role of a database administrator. But it is not a tedious role. It is not one where you are doing something 24/7. Now, some days can be like that in the in the events where you're working a project, you're doing major work, major deployments, things like that. It can be those seasons can be tasking and be a lot, but it is not always the case. Typically, it's more support, it's more monitoring, right? Especially when it's done properly, when infrastructure is set up the right way, when your databases are built out the right way. You shouldn't be fighting fires all the time. So what makes our role critical is the value of our work, not the volume, right? It is the importance of the thing we protect. Businesses need to have database administrators for quick response, if that makes sense, right? For quick response, for support, for knowing that we have the right set of eyes looking at our most important asset in this business, and that is our data, right? It is the things that we do. If data is compromised, that's the business compromised right there. And so you want the best people, you want intelligent people, you want smart people overseeing and having oversight over your data, right? And so the role of a database administrator is encompassing of a lot of things, right? From building out your infrastructure, so the physical database servers where your databases will live, building that out in cahoots with the server team, the server engineers, the networking team. You're working with them to build out the physical infrastructure, or in some cases, virtual infrastructure, so virtual machines, or cloud infrastructure, so AWS and Azure. If you've heard any of those terms, that's infrastructure. That is the quote unquote physical location where the data is stored or where the data lives, because we do not, beyond storing, can get granular, start talking about storage and hard drives and all of those, all of that. But the home, the where the database lives and is housed, we consider that the infrastructure, right? And so you are coordinating, to build that out. We might not necessarily have to build out the physical servers or create the clusters. And I know I'm saying some more advanced things, Google it on what a cluster is, right? Windows cluster. It's just a collection of servers networked together for a specific function. And that's a very simplistic definition. It's a bit more than that, because then that just sounds like a network. So we're not necessarily, I digress there. We're not necessarily building the hardware portions or the cloud portions, but we are working with people who do that to build our database servers. We're doing the installation after the physical infrastructure has been built out, or the VM servers, the Hyper-Vs, the VMwares. After they've been built out, we do the SQL Server installation, we do the Oracle installation. That way that server becomes a database server ready to administer data, ready to support business critical information, right? So our work begins from there to configuring, now your new database server, setting it up properly so that it is able to accomplish the things you needed to do, right? Again, like I talked about earlier, if you're constantly fighting fires and you're constantly busy and resolving issues, and something is breaking and you're working 24/7, you're answering calls, get are popping, I would say there's an architecture issue, right? There's a design issue, there's configuration issues. Our role involves making sure that the database infrastructure, the database environment rather, is designed to where things should work seamlessly, right? It's optimized, it's set up to where it's optimized for performance. So things are moving the way they should, and people can access information quickly, right? And there's no delays. The indexes are configured or set up. You have maintenance set up. You have, like, the goal should be, it's designed and optimized in a way where you don't have to, you're not constantly fighting fires, right? You're not constantly fighting fires. That is the objective, your objective in that realm. So from building out the servers to architecting, infrastructure and design and all of that, to ensure that everything you do the configuration, everything is working seamlessly, and then to just support, making sure that just in case things will always break, doing those root cause analysis, investigating the root cause, resolving the issues promptly, and documenting accordingly, putting things in place to ensure that there's minimal repeat occurrences, documenting thoroughly so that just in case it happens again, we have clearly defined steps on what to do, right, to resolve this if we see this issue again, right? That is, the role of a DBA. And then we start talking about more proactive maintenance type things, like ensuring that we have backups in place. So you're making copies of your data and those are stored in external safe locations, right? So you have, you're backing up to the cloud, you have secondary disaster recovery sites, but you have other places that your data is stored to ensure that you're not caught with your pants down, pretty much, right? You're, in case of a disaster, you have things put in place and things set up to ensure that you are able to recover promptly and the business has next to no or minimal downtime. That is the responsibilities that we have put in place. It's the same thing when we talk about things like high availability. Just means we want to ensure that our systems are highly available. They are available, without downtime. So you'd never hear when Bank of America is down or Amazon is down or any of that. Does it mean their servers are up all the time? No. But there's infrastructure built around the concept of redundancy to ensure that there's not just one, server, one, or just one article, one thing that is responsible for ensuring there's not just one server or object responsible for, data processing or support, transaction processes, and all of that. We are having what we call multiple points of failure. So that just in case server A goes down, server B is available to continue processing customer requests, if that makes sense, right? So that's the goal. That's the concept of high availability. There's different ways that different database platforms do it, and within each platform there are multiple options, right? But those fall under the realm of what the role of a database administrator is, right? So everything from building out the database and database infrastructure to how people are able to connect to the data, what level of access and permissions, protecting the data, making copies of it to ensure that in case of a disaster we can recover, continue serving our customers, to ensuring that there's minimal downtime in case of an outage, and a lot of that. So DBAs do a lot, right? And I want you to start envisioning how this is applicable to our day to day. Where have you seen, or what are things you've done and you feel like, man, I think, there's a DBA behind the scenes doing something here? I'll give you an example. When you do a transaction on Zelle and send the transfer to a friend in a different location and the money is there, in seconds of you sending the transfer. I always like to use this example because we can relate to this, or we could all use somebody sending us Zelle, right? But I receive an update or a notification in near real time letting me know that somebody sent me $100 from Texas. Money doesn't physically leave Texas and appear in Atlanta where I am, but records are updated promptly, right, to reflect that transaction. That is possible because there is things put in place by database administrators, right? The reason why, another example I'll use is, when you go for, let's say you were going for doctor's visits, you go for your doctor's visits, and they're always asking you questions, and then do things, all of that drama goes on. Let's say you change doctors, you move to a different, maybe your doctor lives, you go to a different hospital, and they impute, and this happened to me one time, they impute your information, and then suddenly like, oh, okay, are you still on this medication? Have you been doing this? Is this still happening with you? Do you still have this? And you're like, I'm just coming here for the first time. How do you guys know all of this? Distribution of data, right? The data is in a database and is available, is distributed to maybe people within that same system, right? And so the doctors that you've gone to are able to serve you better because of the data that is efficiently stored and shared for doctors in that network or using that application. And so whenever the doctor is able to effectively leverage your historical data to treat you properly, say thank you to a DBA, right? So the life of a DBA is very, is real world applicable. The role of a DBA rather is very applicable. It's very real world applicable, and it's super important, the work that the database administrator does. And so that is one of the reasons why I'm always an advocate for this particular career path, because it's meaningful work that we do. It's, a lot of people cannot say what the value of the work they do is and how they impact the business or they impact revenue or any of that. And that's, for me, not a very good place to be, because if your work is not making impact, then you are dispensable, easily dispensable. Everybody is dispensable, but not everybody is easily, you can't get rid of everybody easily. The role of the DBA makes you more difficult to get rid of, if that makes sense. All right. So there are other roles, adjacent roles that I want to just highlight for today. So the first one is the developer, the role of a developer. So people talk about the developer, and the first thing they think of is code. They think of code, they think of writing scripts, and that is applicable. Those are not necessarily the definition. Scripting and code writing, these are tools. And I always tell people DBAs are also developers in a sense. Database administrators are developers because we are involved in the development process a lot of the time, majority of the time, if not all of the time, right? So it's the development just means we're building. Right, when you say somebody a housing developer, they are building this person that builds houses, basically. Barren land, the developer comes, does all the surveys and all of that, and then builds new houses on there. That's a developer. He builds, he goes to a place and builds, right? And then I just talk about building out new database servers. So we are part of the development in a sense. We're part of the dev team or development team or development efforts. We support development efforts. We might not have the title, right? So a developer is someone who builds, right? Who innovates, right? How can we rewrite this code to do certain things? So the code, the scripts, these are just tools that they use, to attain the results that they want, which is to build things. That's the platforms they use, right? So they write code, the right code to build and maintain applications, software, websites, web applications, all of that. All right. So one of the strengths you need to have to be a good developer is you need to have a level of creativity. Your mind has to work a certain way. That's why you see some developers, interesting people, I'll put it that way, for political reasons, right? And so it's there's a level of creativity. Your mind has to be almost beautiful in a sense to be a good developer. I'm not saying you have to be a certain way, but I'm saying you have to be creative. Your mind has to work creatively. You have to have a passion for building new things. If you're not one who is excited about building stuff, you will struggle as a developer. If you're not excited about creating and just you jump on the chance to make something and bring something to life, then development might be difficult for you, right? You have to be somebody who loves solving problems, right? Identifying and solving problems. So a lot of the times you're not building something new when it comes to development, right? You're not building something new, but you are building, you are improving something that already exists. You're adding a functionality, which is going to be a new development, but it's new development on an existing application, right? So you see how we're always getting enhancements on Instagram, on Facebook, and so you see the platforms are evolving. They remove things, they add new things. What they are doing is they're just rewriting portions of the same application. So Instagram, it's there, it's not changing, it's not going away. But then their development team is always building out, rebuilding or building new aspects, right? Writing new functionality into the platform, right? So that's what a developer does. They are constantly, and that's why that creativity is required. You need to see, okay, this can be enhanced, this can be done better, this can be nicer the way it looks. The experience of our customers can be better when they go through this. And so now you're jumping on writing solutions to answer that need that you have found. You are looking for, you're writing things to fix the way you do the thing that you've discovered is not being done the right way. All right. So that's development. That's the beauty. That's what developers do. They're builders, they're creative people. So if you're someone who's creative, you love to build new things, you will excel as a developer. You have to love solving problems, right? We have what we call bugs. A bug is just a problem within a code that you can resolve, and then it makes functionality better. You need to have a high tolerance for fast-paced kind of work, on project-based work. So a lot of times, if you work really today, because of how fast technology is evolving, and a lot of the time, how developers know what to build is not necessarily them feel like, okay, might be good, this might not be good. It's also getting customer feedback. I'm sure this has happened to you where something goes on and maybe you have an error within your Windows application. Let me use Windows for example. And then it's resolved mysteriously, Windows reboots or something. And then you get a prompt, to maybe submit this error to Microsoft so that they can use that to build a platform. When you say yes to that request, that is going to, maybe like a problem document or something, or a product enhancement. These guys are looking over it, and that's how they come up with ideas on how to constantly improve the product. It's taking feedback from platforms like that or opportunities like that. And if something is a constant requirement or request that people have been asking for, that is an idea for a new enhancement, a new product, a new addition, a new feature to an existing product. So that's how they're constantly building. So somebody who is a developer needs to be able, some companies move fast. They want to change, they take feedback, they want to implement very quickly. And so you should be okay with like working fast-paced environments or fast-paced situations. You should also be very okay with doing project-based work. Some people just want to be part of the daily flow, but sometimes development involves start and stop, very clearly defined end and goals, and you build and then you're done. So those are some things you need to consider when you're exploring a career as a developer. In terms of what does that imply from a lifestyle perspective, it can involve like tight deadlines. There's something called scope creep. A project starts as one thing, and then the requirements keep evolving, and sometimes organizations might not be as cooperative. They might have undue pressure, maybe because of customer pressure. Now that pressure is transferred to developers who have to make this thing come alive. So sometimes it's like that. You have to have that tolerance for fast-paced environments. Tight deadlines are a thing that you have to be okay working under. Constant learning. Most tech roles, this will apply. But for developers, you have to, that's one for sure, where you're constantly learning. That lifelong learning mindset has to be, even if you're not going to do it for life, for the time you're doing this, you have to love learning. You have to love improving yourself. You have to love the process of just upskilling. There's always new frameworks, there's new languages to learn, there's enhancements on existing languages. You have to be willing to constantly learn. You have to be excited, I'll say, not just willing but excited, because it's learning a new or new programming language. Let's say there was time when Python is the vogue. A lot of platforms built on Python, for example, and you started off doing C. You might need to upskill, right? So, and again, for all I know, those two platforms might not be related. So just that willingness to upskill and learn quickly and move on from the things you've already known and done well and done for a long time. And this role focus on delivering, the focus is on delivering new functions, delivering requirements, delivering, the company goals. And so that's the developer as a builder. That's one I wanted to talk about. The next one I want to talk about is the system administrator. I talked about earlier how the role of a DBA is not in isolation. We work especially when it comes to building out new database infrastructure, there's a hardware component to it. The guy who builds the physical servers is the system administrator. Generally speaking. So the sysadmin is they can be going at the title of infrastructure manager, system and operations admin. All of that is still around the same job title, job responsibilities, right? So who or what does the system administrator do? They build out servers, physical infrastructure, virtual, cloud. That's your first point of contact. They manage the servers. They don't just build, they're responsible for the health of the servers, everything from updates to functionality, performance, right? Configuring networks and supporting the networks, making sure that every server is on the network has the right, network configurations, right? They are responsible for operating systems. Every operating system question is a server administrator question. 99.9% of the time, right? So patching, that means applying, upgrades or updates rather, to your operating system, is under the realm of the system administrator. And all things infrastructure, these fall under the role of the server administrator. This was where I started off my career, right? So I was speaking to my manager when I was like, I'm an infrastructure guy. When it comes to my lane, there are people who come from the programming side of things, who come from the development side. They, dev DBA type mindsets. That's their lane. So you see them, they want to embrace, more coding related some days they forget and do, they dance back into that development, from time to time. The infrastructure guys, we put things together and we break and combine and we're good with troubleshooting and figuring out why and getting to the root cause and those type of things. So that's some of the roles of the database administrator. So as what makes you a good fit, right? You need to be savvy from a technical perspective. You have to understand because again, these guys never work in isolation. So the system administrator might need to know about storage. They're going to need to understand storage, SAN, all of that. You're going to need to understand networks, right? Networking, basic IP addressing, and not just basic. I feel like more complex IP addressing, security, Active Directory, all of that. So you have to have a wide, technical knowledge base to be a good system administrator. You have to also love troubleshooting, right? Troubleshooting, what's the root cause? A lot of the hardware things are going to be require troubleshooting. I feel like this might be a major part of the work is the support aspect. So looking, investigating, hardware and software failures. Why did it fail and what led to what's the root cause analysis or root cause of this, right? And you have to have this desire to keep the entire tech ecosystem running smoothly. Period. Point blank period, right? It's about making sure things are running, minimal breakdowns, if there's a breakdown, fast response times, right? If that makes sense, fast response times, and in terms of what makes you a fit, one of the lifestyle things to understand about the sysadmin, right? Again, it's wide range of responsibilities. You have to be able to speak to multiple lanes in tech. You have to understand, like I said, networking, and you might need to understand storage. You might need to understand some development, all of that. So there's that wide range of responsibilities that your hand is somehow involved in. The full blame acceptor is the DBA. The server engineer, the server administrator is a close second and first in some cases because again, I can't connect server. I can't connect data. So they get accused of a lot of things too, just like us. And so it's unexpected outages are a norm. You have to be one that focuses on stability across a large number of systems. That's some of the lifestyle requirements that come with you being a server administrator. I'm going to stay on just those two for today because of the time. So how do I know where I best fit? One, you have to analyze your strengths. Should I be a DBA? Should I be a developer? Should I be a server administrator? Right? Analyze your strengths. Are you meticulous? Are you detail oriented? Maybe you might be a good DBA because it's a lot of data integrity, that we have to focus on. If you love to create, to build, like I said before, then you might be a developer. You're excited about bringing things to life and seeing things go from nothing to something beautiful. Then development might be your lane. And if you like a little bit of everything, you want to do websites, you want to do coding, you still love troubleshooting issues and solving things, just somebody of many talents and doing different things, then a sysadmin role lane might be ideal for you. So other things to consider your lifestyle. Do you prefer a predictable routine or project-based work? Right? So a lot of DBAs work in operations. So we have more routine-driven work. Developers have a lot of project-driven work. Right? This is a product that we're trying to create. You guys go build it. So the focus while I'm on that lane is building out that thing. So that's project-based, very predictable outcome routines, DBA, project-based developers, right? Another thing to consider is, are you okay with on-call duties, right? So all of those three roles can do on-call, but as a DBA, and a sysadmin, you will be on call at some point. Maybe the job you are now doesn't have, is not 24/7 transactional, but if you run into that kind of environment, you will be on call. Somebody will have to be able to answer those after hours calls and resolve after hours issues, issues arising after hours. So if that's something that you are okay with, then DBA might be a good fit for you. If it is something you are not going to try, no, DBA will not work for you because at some point you'll be on call. What's your learning style, right? That's another question to keep in mind. Developers, often learn new languages while DBAs deep dive into specific database systems, right? We explore systems like Oracle, SQL Server, MySQL. Like I said, you have to immerse yourself. Developers are always learning code and new coding formats and things that have been introduced, all of that. So those are some of the things I wanted to highlight for these different career paths to help you start thinking of and considering these things, as you navigate your lane, and try to find your lane, when it comes to careers in information technology. Right. So again, I've talked about the role of a database administrator, one who is, who works, protects the data, makes sure business critical data is safe and all of that. And then the developer who is the builder, right? They take requirements and bring it to life and they use different types of code and scripting as their vehicle. And then there's a system administrator who is able to do a bit of everything, who has a wide knowledge of things. Generally speaking, they focus on building our server, supporting it, and ensuring that anyone that needs to have access is well supported. That is a high level overview of all the things we've talked about today. So you know what the requirements are. Start asking yourself, my level, am I an analytical person? Do I have the patience to do the work and do the research and get to the root cause? Am I somebody who likes to build, who likes to create? All of that. Start asking yourself those questions, and explore, reflect on your strengths and your preferences, right? And just reflect what am I, and then start thinking, okay, position yourself properly. That'll be another session for another day. Or position yourself properly to, get to that place where you can get started in the career here and you know what you're doing. So that's my time for today. I hope this has been helpful for someone. I hope you've gained some value from it. If you have, please go ahead and make sure you subscribe to this channel. Subscribe. Let's keep your subscription helps us reach more people. So subscribe, share, and spread the word to your circle. And come back again next week Saturday for an exciting conversation.